Hello and welcome to another edition of the House Refresh series. All the things that I had to do in relation to putting new siding on the house. And if you recall the video that was done on replacing the sheathing, I talked about the old faucet that had to come out along with some other things that had to be removed or redone to allow for the siding to be replaced. Well, that's been replaced. Stick around if you want to see the steps I went through to get that done. So, let's get started. The pipe I need to cut is tucked up into joists, and there's a bunch of house wiring going around it. So it's going to be an interesting challenge to get to. I have to put the ladder in a section that's nestled between water heater and a pressure tank. So this should be fun. I'll be working with copper, and since I'm working in very tight quarters, I'm going to use one of my small pipe cutters that'll fit into the space, and then we'll be cleaning up the end of the pipe and get it ready for a coupling. I've marked a spot 2 inches away from the inside shutoff valve. I always have shutoff valves ahead of other valves in case they have a need to repair it. I've done that in a lot of areas in this house. I redid the plumbing when I remodeled it many years ago. Now this valve is turned off, the outside valve is open. Well, I know that there's no leakage from this valve, it's completely dry, so I can go ahead and I can cut this pipe. And it will be interesting. I'm on a fiberglass ladder because you never know if you're dealing around wires and something drips. You don't want to have a problem with the electrical current. And I can see that this is going to be fun. I can't make a full swing, so we'll just keep working our way back and forth. And I'll work on this till I get the pipe cut. I couldn't quite make the swing with the other pipe cutter, so I dug into my arsenal of plumbing tools and got an even smaller one that'll make the full swing around the pipe. I've made a couple of turns, and I will go back at it and get that pipe cut. As you can see, I'm working in a pretty tight space. With this close up, I'm just about through the pipe. With a couple more turns, I should have it off of there. We are through the pipe. That's a heavy gauge copper. I always use heavy gauge copper for any of my plumbing. It's just, especially being in a rural setting with a lot of minerals in the water, it's a good idea to use a good strong copper. And I'm a copper guy. I just haven't bought into the flex tubing stuff at all. I like the rigidity of using copper pipe. So anyway, it's time to go outside, remove the screws, and pull the old faucet out. Move a couple of screws, and we should be able to pull this thing right out. And there you have it. The old valve is out. Once we get the sheathing replaced and the new block put on with the siding, I'll be ready to put the new valve in. Today is the big day. We're going to put the new replacement outside faucet in. All of the siding work is done. The block has been put in. Right here, the furnace intake and exhaust we're going to be working on later. Had duct tape over the hole here to make sure we didn't have critters come in while we were waiting. Took that off. Now let's take a look at the stuff we're going to be putting in. Here's the frost-free faucet that's going to be going in. It's a 17-inch long one. It's the shortest one I could get, and that will fit in the space I have available down there.
I already inserted it through that opening one day, and I did some measurements and came up with what I needed for connecting fittings. Unfortunately, I was doing a lot of things that day. I got busy and I went ahead and soldered these in without making a video of that soldering process. It's a piece of 1/2 inch heavy wall copper soldered into the end of that valve, and then a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch coupling soldered onto that, and it's that 3/4 that's going to slip over the 3/4 inch pipe down in the basement that's going to supply this valve. But I will be making a video of the soldering process once I get this inserted down there. So that's going to be our next step. Get this put in, lined up, anchored on the outside, and get it soldered. Before I put the pipe in, I'm going to run the brush through the end of the fitting to make sure it's roughed up. You need that clean and you need it roughed up so you've got a good mechanical bond from the solder to the coupling and the pipe. And I'm going to go ahead and put the flux on that. Flux is necessary to make the solder flow once you heat the fitting up. This would be a little hard to do once I put that pipe in up there because I don't have a lot of room to work. The next thing we're going to do is go up and make sure that the pipe is ready to put this coupling on before we solder. I would be hard pressed to find a more awkward place to try to work. Up here among some wiring. We're jammed up in here. I've got the outside cleaner tool. I'm going to take a couple passes around the outside edge of the pipe to get that cleaned and roughed up so we're ready to put some flux on. I'm going to make sure that I get this completely coated, because if you have a spot that doesn't have any flux, solder won't flow and you're going to have a leak. I'm just going to run my finger on the back side because I can't get to it with the brush. Make sure I've got it coated. Now we can go ahead and slide our pipe in and get it lined up so we can solder. I've got the faucet pushed into the hole up to the point where it's just touching the pipe on the inside. I can go inside now and get it started on there. Then I have to guide it the rest of the way in and get it underneath that little bit of flashing over that piece of blocking. And you'll notice also that I've pulled the valve out far enough so that I know that I have airflow, because if you have it sealed up, sometimes it pushes the solder back if you've got a vacuum. So I've got that open. Any of the heat generated in the soldering process, the air will flow out of the valve and won't cause me any problems. Took a wrench to get on the valve and get it leveled up here as much as I could. And now I'm ready to fasten it in with a couple of screws so it doesn't move, and then we can go in and get it soldered. I'm going to go ahead and anchor this valve to the blocking and to a couple layers of sheathing behind it with a couple of stainless self-tapping screws, flange head. Hold this in place. Stop just a little short so I don't over torque it. There. Alright, we are secured. We're ready to go do some soldering. Before we start soldering, notice that I've put a piece of scrap steel siding up above the point where I'm going to be soldering to protect the wood. I've always tried to do that whenever I'm working in tight spaces between joists underneath a floor. It just prevents problems. I also have close at hand a fire extinguisher on the ready, just in case. To do the soldering, I'm going to be using your typical lead-free solder that you use on plumbing connections and a MAP gas torch, one I've had for years. MAP gas heats up quickly. You can get the solder in and not damage things close to it or unsolder parts that are close to it. If you use propane torch, it's just not hot enough, takes too long to heat up, and just makes the job harder.
We've got everything in place. Let's go ahead and get this thing soldered. And this is why we use a metal shield when we're soldering pipe connections in a really tight spot. I've opened the main valve, and so far the only thing that has leaked is the packing, the valve stem packing on the old valve. So I tightened that up a little bit just to snug it, and it was just dripping slightly. But the joints, they seem to be holding. I've got the faucet closed outside. I have pressure on it. We'll just watch it a little bit. Sometimes they fool you and they start to weep water, but nothing is spraying out right now. So let's go outside and take a look and see what we have. On another side note, when I install things new, I never put in these gator or globe valves because they're just too temperamental. When I do new installation, I always put in ball valves. They're on and off real fast, and they're a lot easier to install. They're a lot more dependable. This is the filter and bypass system I installed when I put the pressure tank in several years ago. And you can see I use ball valves on that type of thing. Just works out a whole lot better. But this one was here. It's what I got to work with because I'm not tearing everything out to replace it. Well, here we are on the outside, and I see there's nothing leaking around the valve stem on this one. I had to put that back in. I got it snug, and so that's okay. So let's see what we have here. Look at that. We've got water on the front of the house again. Now if we get some dry weather, I can water the garden up there. Looks like we've got another job done successfully by an old retired farm kid. On to the next project. So once again, I ask that if you have enjoyed this video, that you please click like and subscribe so you're notified when we have new videos in this house refresh series or cooking or many of the other things we do. And appreciate your time today watching. So until next time, take care.